This expedition, in my view, was our most successful expedition to date. Our objective on this trip was to see if we could find material from which it might be possible to extract contact DNA, sometimes referred to as touch DNA, DNA from an object that a person has touched. We did use very specific protocols to recover material under sterile conditions to the extent that it was possible. We did find a number of artifacts that at least have that potential. I delivered those artifacts to the DNA lab in Canada. I did that just 2 days ago. And they selected 10 items that they thought were worth making an attempt to extract DNA from them. And of course, they have a reference sample of Earhart family mitochondrial DNA. From the standpoint of DNA retrieval, perhaps the most promising object is a small glass jar that was found in 5 constituent pieces. 3 of the pieces are relatively large. We have most of the jar, probably 85%. From what we can see, this thing definitely has a feminine feel to it. Other things, we have 2 buttons of roughly the same size. They're not the identical size, even though they were found right together. We have the body of a jackknife. We had found one part of the knife in 2007, and this time we found the rest of the knife except for the blades. It was really very interesting that when we found the body of the knife, it became apparent that someone had taken this knife apart very forcibly. They hit it with blunt objects and were really trying to break the knife apart so as to extract the blades of the knife. Then you ask yourself, of course, well, why would someone want to take the blades out of a small pocket knife? And you can speculate that someone may have wanted the blades to make a spear. Other things that might have DNA, we found a cloth bow, a piece of cloth that appears to have been tied into a bow. It's hard to imagine that this cloth has survived in that environment for all those years. We don't yet know what kind of cloth it is because, again, it was collected under sterile conditions and put in a bag immediately. It appears to be a fairly open weave cotton. We have 9 more pieces of the material, little flakes, wafers of a reddish-orange substance that has been chemically tested as being consistent with early 20th century makeup. Theoretically, it's rouge from a woman's compact. And of course, we have 2 pieces of very thin glass that fit together and match a known mirror from a 1930s vintage woman's compact. These would have to be things she had with her. She was on a flight around the world and was dealing with the media at almost every stop. You know, she was a celebrity making a world tour, and she was known to carry cosmetics with her on her trips so that she could look good for the cameras. One of the things we've been curious about is how a castaway might be able to get enough water to survive on an island where there is no fresh water except rain that falls. In the forest, after a hard rain, and we did have one day when we had several periods of hard rain, the large leaves that lie on the ground, many of them lie on the ground in such a way that there's a concave surface, and you could get as several ounces of water that's just lying in a concave leaf. And many of the large, they're called bucca trees. The Latin name is Pisonia grandis, but they're large trees that often form like bowls at the base in the trunk and roots. And there's several cups of water that lie in these bowls in the tree roots. So you would be able to collect water from places like that after rain, but you'd need a way to collect it, and it takes a small bottle that you can put down into a puddle or a concave leaf or the bowl of a tree to collect the water that you might then put in a larger bottle and boil it to make it safe to drink. My personal opinion is that the castaway that we're seeing evidence of at this site was certainly on the island for a matter of weeks and possibly months. What we can say is that the site where the bones were found is the last place where the castaway camped. We found 3 fire features in 2001, and this time, with a more thorough excavation of the site, we found 9 more. So we have like a total of 11 fire features there. One of the things we did after the 2007 expedition, we had collected a number of bird bones, fish bones, turtle bones from these features. And we sent the fish bones to Dr. Sharon Jones at University of Alabama. She's an anthropologist who specializes in Pacific Island cultures. And she was able to identify species by species the fish that were represented. We had over 1,400 fish bones, bird bones, turtle bones. And she was able to identify the species and make a judgment based on what kind of fish were being eaten and what parts of the fish were being eaten. And her opinion was that these fire features did not represent an indigenous Pacific Islander, but would be more consistent with a Westerner basically getting whatever they could find to eat. And now we'll have a lot more work for Dr. Jones to do to see if these bones also are consistent with the bones found before, and that will tell us more about how to interpret the site. Just finding this place on the island as a place to live suggests someone who really knows the island. When we first began investigating this site as a place where the bones might have been found, we were very puzzled that it was so far from the area where other information suggests that the airplane was landed, at the other end of the island. Why is somebody way down here at the southeast end? But the more familiar we became with the site, the more apparent it became that this is actually the best place on the island for a castaway to live. It is where the island is narrowest, but still, at least at that time, was covered with open forest that provided shade. You get very nice breezes from the prevailing easterly trade winds. A very pleasant place to be with easy access, because it's so narrow there, easy access to the ocean reef and the lagoon for food. You have different kinds of fish on the reef and different kinds of fish in the lagoon. It's immediately adjacent to the buka forest where there are birds. Even today, the birds tend to nest in the shade along the beachfront, and you could walk right up to one and grab them by the neck. They'd be very easy to catch. Really, one of the best places on the whole island for a castaway to live, and you would think it would have to take some time to figure that out. There are several kinds of crabs on the island, and in our experience, if you sleep on the ground, the crabs can be a problem. When we sit down to eat lunch, there are hundreds of these little strawberry hermit crabs that come scuttling up to us and will climb up your shoes and will climb right up your leg. If you lie down to take a nap, they think you're dead. They'll come over and they have little claws. They'll pinch a piece right out of you. Someone debilitated enough to not be able to move very much, to be literally eaten alive like that, doesn't bear much thinking about. It'd be horrible. And in fact, we've wondered if there may be something about the multitude of fire features that might be explained as a way to keep the crabs away. Yeah. The area that we had theorized the airplane probably was landed is on the western end of the atoll, out on the reef, near where the waves break, because that's a place that on the reef that dries at low tide and is smooth and wide enough to land an airplane on. Really the only place on the island to land an airplane. Shortly before I left on this latest expedition, we discovered that a photograph taken 3 months after Earhart disappeared, in October 1937, photograph taken by the first British colonial investigation of the island, investigating the island for future settlement. On their departure, one of the administrators, a man named Eric Bevington, took a photograph that included the shipwreck that's on the western edge and the shoreline. It's just a picture of the island. But on the left-hand side of the frame, we can see that there is something sticking up out of the water that really shouldn't be there. It's quite clearly a man-made object. It's really an unexplained and unexplainable object sticking up out of the water in this photograph. And it turns out to be just in the place where a woman who once lived on the island, who now lives in Fiji, she's quite elderly now, but in 1999, she told us of seeing airplane wreckage on the reef in just that spot. And now we have this photograph that shows an anomaly, a man-made object in that same location. Now, we calculated exactly where that location was and transposed that onto a satellite image of the island. And while we were out there on this last trip, we went out and investigated that spot. We had the capability of doing underwater searching on this trip. And what we discovered is that that reef drops off almost vertically down to 1,000 feet, about 300 meters. So if there is airplane wreckage down there, it's at a depth we didn't have the capability of searching on this trip. So we're hoping to build a strong enough case to be able to raise the money to go back with capability of searching at greater depths and find the airplane.